Alright, what happens over here when you see something, right, we can tell these have the same denominator. When they have the same denominator, it's very, very simple. We just count them all up. 1 plus 4, that's going to be 5 of these. It's out of 8, so here we go. We end up with 5/8, and that's our answer, right? But what happens if you have something like this? Well, we have talked about before that when the denominators aren't the same, you can't really add them up very well, right? So you can't be like, oh, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4/8. Well, it's obviously not, because we know that 4/8 is the same as 1/2, and this is already more than 1/2, right? So that's not going to work. So what do? We're going to change this fraction. We're going to use our skills that we just picked up in the last couple of worksheets. We're going to change that fraction into something with the same denominator so that we can just easily count them up and add them, right? So these two fractions we can see, we can visualize, we can see that these two are equal. 3/4 equals 6/8, yes? And you can see those are equal. Then from there we just say, okay, we got 6 plus 1, that's going to be 7. Here's our final answer, 7 out of 8. Right, so when we add this plus this, it equals this, because we changed our fraction there, right? Now, what does the math look like for this thing? We have 1/8 plus 3/4. Then, we're going to, in order to change this thing, we're going to multiply by some version of 1, right? So, visually, we want this to not be different. We want it to look a little different, but be totally the same. Right? We want it to have the same value, we want it to be equal, so that we don't change it. So, how do we do that in math? Well, we multiply by some variation of 1. In this case, 2/2 equals 1. You learned that in a previous video, previous worksheet. And when we do that, you get 6 on the top and 8 on the bottom, right? So it's going to look like this. So the 1/8 comes down, we get 6 on the top, 8 on the bottom when we just multiply, right? Multiplying fractions, super simple. And because we now have 8 on the bottom, that's super good. 8 on the bottom here, 8 on the bottom there. We can add these up, 1 plus 6, and we're going to get 7. Right? So, this process is the process by which we change the denominator. Why do we change the denominator? Because we want them to be the same, so that we can just count up the shaded in pieces, and that's how we do our addition. Here is the simplified math, right? 1/8 plus 3/4, and then we multiply by some version of 1. That means 3/4 becomes the same value, but it just looks a little bit different, and we get 7/8. Now here's the critical portion of this. You have to do your math like this. It has to look like this, alright? It has to have some kind of a fraction. You have to multiply this thing. You want to change that denominator, that's cool. We have to multiply this thing by some version of 1, some fraction that equals 1. So 2/2, 3/3, 7/7, 18/18, doesn't make any difference to me, right? You'll pick whichever one makes sense. Obviously here, if you multiplied by 3/3, you would end up with a denominator of 12. 12 isn't going to be very helpful because you're going to end up in that same position where you can't add them. So, you guys will figure out how to get the same denominators. But the key thing is, it has to be 2/2, 3/3, it has to be some version of 1, and then it's got to have these parentheses around it. One of the things that you guys like to do is something that looks a little bit like this. This is ridiculous, and we're not going to take it seriously. Do not do this. This, yes. This, no. This, under no circumstances will we accept this thing. This is ridiculous. Why? Because it loses the entire point of what you're doing, right? Sure, technically it ends up with the same numbers, but you don't really get it then, right? What you're doing here is you are multiplying by 1 in order to make this look a little bit different but have the same value. That's the whole point, is just look a little different but have the same value because we're multiplying by 1. 2/2 equals 1. In this case, multiplying by 2, that nothing over here equals 1, so you lose the whole point, right? So, regardless, this is not a thing that we will accept under any circumstances. Do not write your math this way. This is how we write the math. It has to have parentheses, has to be a fraction. Alright, let's do it. Ready, set, practice.